So for Easter, we get readings from Acts, we get readings from 1 Peter, and then we get readings from John and Luke and Matt. It's a mixture of the Gospels. Why? But we're going to look at the gospel lessons in Bible study after church, okay? I'm guessing most of you, all right, I shouldn't say that. I would never make any claims like that. I'm guessing even though you have all studied it, it may have been a while since you really looked at 1 Peter. Is that fair, or are all you experts on 1 Peter? So I wouldn't say that you didn't. I'm just saying maybe it's been a minute. Maybe it's been a week since you read the entire Bible. I don't know. It's that whole, like, Easter's over, I'm relaxing a little, yeah. So we're going to look at 1 Peter. We're going to get 1 Peter, almost all of it, chunks of it, over the season of Easter. So we're not going to cover every single thing, but we're going to look at what we get and why that is important for us now. Why does it matter? Exactly. Yep. I need it, or else I just fall asleep. Yeah. So today we start with 1 Peter verse 1, or chapter 1. We don't get the first two verses, and I meant to have my trusty little Bible, or my phone, whichever. Because it starts off telling us who it's written for. It says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen and destined by God the Father and sanctified by the Spirit to be obedient to Jesus Christ, to be sprinkled with his blood. May grace and peace be yours in abundance. Where are those five places located? Right? We often hear lots of names of towns or areas or kind of counties or whatever you want to call them, districts. I'll give you a hint. Northern Asia Minor. Northern Asia Minor. What modern day name does it have? Turkey. Who said that? My assistant. The voice from above. Because she is above. Yeah, all right. Turkey. Generally the area of Turkey, right? East of Constantinople. Generally the area of Turkey covers like 95% of this land now. So it says, Peter the apostle, don't tar and feather me. It probably wasn't written by Peter, okay? Now, we might say, well, why is it in the Bible? It's plagiarism or something, right? Hold your breath. It's okay. It was very common at that time that if you followed under the instruction or believed, like followed the class, you had someone as a, for us, maybe like a professor or a teacher, someone that we studied under constantly. They were kind of our mentor. Everything that we have, we've kind of learned through them. You would honor that person by writing something on their behalf, in a sense, and in their name. Kind of showing everything that you believe they would teach about that time in that place. There's a couple letters that are attributed to Paul that most likely Paul did not write, but it'd be the same thing. Followers of Paul may have written them using his name to show that they follow his teachings. We don't know exactly when 1 Peter was written. It was probably sometime before the other Gospels really circulated. It's probably somewhere around, maybe they say 60 to 80 or 90, somewhere in there. Closer to the end, later part of that, they believe. But the point is not, oh, well, Peter didn't write it. The point is, this is the lessons, the teachings, the beliefs, the gospel that's being spread and shared down through generations and being shared with us even today and now. What is the main point? What are they trying to get across to us? Why does it matter to them at that time? And how might we apply that to ourselves now? This was written to a general audience. Like I said, it's a whole area, pretty large area in that time and place where you couldn't just put a letter in the mail and then fly it across, right, the continent and deliver it to someone's doorstep. It had to be carried along, walking, maybe riding. It was a letter that was dealing with the reality that we've now entered the time when Christians are weird. Obviously, that's not true now, but just some of us. They are going against the norms, especially in this area, because this isn't even Israel, right? This isn't Judah. This is the land where there aren't as many Jewish people, and so they're worshiping different gods, different religions. So the Christians are doing things really strange. And because people have decided to, practice their faith, because they feel called to follow Christ, because they are doing these things that maybe be different from their family, their community, everybody they've ever known or loved, they're starting to be pushed away, called names, rejected, because they're going against tradition. They're following the new God, yep. And so this letter is being written to help encourage them, to help them learn what it is to live in a place where what you believe is not necessarily what everybody else believes. At a time when following Christ, picking up our cross, following Him, serving and loving, sacrificing for others, loving our neighbors as ourselves, may set us apart from what the culture demands. It's something we wrestle with now. When the culture demands a show of power or how great we are. When Christ calls us to be humble and to serve. We want to force our way upon others with violence as a community or a culture. When Christ says, turn the other cheek. To love our neighbors, even those we don't necessarily like, as ourselves. It's a message that just reaches beyond generations and centuries and millennia of what it is to truly follow Christ's example of going and being with the outcasts, welcoming in those who society rejects, welcoming people into community because our community is based on what Jesus has done for us, not on any cultural norms or expectations, not any power plays of, well, I'm at this level and you're down here because of X, Y, and Z. We are all the same in the sense of where we fall in terms of, who's more important. But we also rejoice because we're all different. Because all of us have different gifts and abilities and experiences that we can then together bring and to share. Much more than any of us can have on our own. Where I have gifts, you may not, and where you have gifts, I may not. Multiply by the people here, the people we know, the people we are related to in faith. And so Peter is starting off this letter to remind us of where our hope lies. In God's mercy, we have been given new hope, a new birth, a living hope. Not because of anything we've done, but what does it say? Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And because Jesus was raised, because Jesus defeated sin and death, we have been given an inheritance that's imperishable, undefiled, unfading, kept for us. We have been given the living hope of salvation, not something that we only get if we do the right things or say the right stuff or whatever, not something that we have to somehow wait for and obtain, but it's already been given to us. We live a life of hope and a life of God's chosen and redeemed and sanctified and saved people now. We live our life knowing our salvation is secured. We live our life as saved people because Jesus has already accomplished all that it takes to do so. Because God's grace and love and mercy is greater than anything you or I could ever do. Peter is reminding them that this is where our joy comes. That even if things are hard now, right? Even if you've had to suffer various trials, we are being protected by the power of God through faith. Again, protected, our salvation being protected by God. Peter says it's not always going to be easy. Peter says that nothing bad will ever happen, or doesn't say that nothing bad. Woo! Switch that around. Yeah. Peter doesn't say that nothing bad can ever happen to you. You want to preach? Yeah, good. Yeah, it'll be better. All right, okay. Awesome. I tried to let the little children come on to me, but they were like, nope. Nope, I'm out. Better deal over here. Yep. You scary, him better. Okay. Right? Peter acknowledges that things aren't easy. Peter acknowledges that we're going to have to suffer, that there are going to be things that cause us to suffer, that truly if we pick up our cross, if we sacrifice on behalf of God and one another, that there will be things that sacrifice demands. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be great. And there's no promise that just because you are a claimed child of God, that nothing bad in this world will ever happen to us. The promise, as Peter says, is protection by God through faith for our salvation. Even the pains of this world, right? Paul writes it in Romans, right? Neither death, nor life, nor things present, nor things to come. Nothing in all creation. Death itself cannot separate us from this love of God because of what Christ has done for us. We hear that we may not all have seen him, but we can rejoice with indescribable and glorious joy because we have already received. We are constantly receiving the outcome of our faith, the salvation of our souls, it says. So, we often talk about faith formation, but I was reminded listening to a podcast this week One of the words in this text is also hope. And that just like faith, hope often needs formed, practiced, learned, shared with others. So we challenge each other maybe to think about hope formation. We share our faith, but we can also share our hope. Because there are times, as I've said before, where maybe our faith is shaken. And just like our faith being shaken, there are times when our hope is definitely shaken. Because what we see around us is just too painful to have that feeling of hope. As I've said before, when our faith is feeling shaken, we can lean on the faith of others. That we don't always have to have everything. That none of us ever actually will have that perfect faith. And when we're feeling a little hopeless, there are ways in which we share that hope with one another. Telling stories of hope. Sharing experiences of hope. Because Peter tells us in this letter, Christ calls us through his death and resurrection to not only be joyful, to not only give thanks, but to take solace in the hope that only Christ can give. So this Easter, as we walk through this letter, 1 Peter, as we examine and look at the ways in which this writer is talking to the people in northern Asia Minor, and the land now is Turkey, as they were reminding them to hold fast to their faith, that things are not always going to be easy, acknowledging that things are hard. But he starts right off at the beginning. Why do we have hope? Well, it's what we celebrated last week, and we'll celebrate for 5 more weeks. And then every other week after that, because those are all little Easters. That Christ on the cross defeats sin and death so that we have life. We have salvation. So we grow together in our faith, in our worship, our study, our prayer, and let us also grow together in our hope. Amen? Amen.